Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Anna and this is my very first cooking video. Now normally you won't see me do an intro like this, but today I just wanted to mention two things. First of all, thank you so much to all those of you that have commented on my last video. I very much appreciate your support. And second, because I know people will ask and I forgot to do it in the voiceover, you will find the ingredients to all the recipes in the description of the video. However, please don't expect precise measurements for every single thing you will see me cook, because sometimes I'm following a recipe and then I'll include the exact measurements, but sometimes I just sort of make things as I go. So with that said, let's start cooking some food. Today I'm cooking three things. The first being a Segedin goulash in Czech. What it really is a pork and sauerkraut goulash. And then I'll be making some banana pancakes and a very simple soup. So I'm starting the goulash the day before because I need some beef broth for that. So I'm putting some beef bones into the oven and roasting them, which is supposed to give the broth a better taste. So the bones that I have are these bone marrow bones, which I guess, or I was then told by my mom, that they're not ideal for the broth since they are very fatty. The bone marrow in it is very fatty, which you will see once it cooks that it's really greasy. I'll also be using some veggies for the broth. What I usually see in recipes are 4 veggies: carrots, celery, parsley, and onion. You see me cutting up some carrots and the celery here. I completely forgot about the onion, so I didn't add that, and I didn't have any parsley. So it's just those two, but it's completely fine. When I was starting making my own broths, I would literally just add the meat and water, and that was it, nothing else. Now that I've gotten more used to it, I'm starting to add more things that hopefully add in more flavor. To be honest, I don't really know if I can tell the difference. I think I would have to have the two broths literally like side by side and taste test them right next to each other to be able to tell if there is a difference. But I don't know, it just feels like the proper way to do it. So I'm doing all the veggies and all the things. So after about 20 minutes, the bones are nice and roasty, so I'm just taking them out, letting them cool. And then once they cool down, I am scooping out all the bone marrow from them, which basically is a fat. So I will later be using that for all kinds of things instead of like maybe butter or oil when I'm frying things or toasting things and things like that. So I just scoop that out and then I can use the bones for the broth. So I'm adding the veggies I've cut up before. I'm also adding some spices. This is bay leaf, and then the other one I'm adding is allspice. Those are, again, the 2 spices I see in all the recipes being added to a broth. So I'm adding those, then filling up the pot with water all the way to the top so I get as much as possible out of this. And then it will just be boiling on very, very low heat. Again, that's what I've read you're supposed to do in order to keep all the great nutritious benefits of it. Like you can see that it's literally just super lightly boiling, not even bubbling almost. That's how slow it's supposed to go. But of course, then it takes time. I think I was having this on for maybe like 4 hours, something like that. And then I can just strain it off into these jars, and I can keep those jars in the fridge for a couple of days. Somewhere I've read up to 3 weeks, but in order for that to work, I think you have to have the fat layer or like the grease layer, I don't know, on top of the jar. So it kind of seals all the broth inside, which I don't think this really did that. So I only kept it for a couple of days before using it all up. And I just wanted to mention the reason I peeled the veggies, which normally you wouldn't have to do if you're just putting them in the broth, is because I want to use them for the soup. Otherwise, you can just throw them in with all the skins on. No worries about that. Same for the onion as well. Don't even need to peel the skin off. It's actually the skin that gives it the nice yellow color. So that's just for the veggies. And this is already the next day when I'm getting ready to make the goulash. So I'm starting with some of the bone marrow that you saw me scoop out earlier, because I will be using that to fry up some onions, and then I'll add in the meat. I'll talk about the meat a little bit later. And with the onions, you saw me pull out this giant knife. It's only been a couple of months that I bought a chef's knife for the first time, and I'm definitely not very skilled with it yet. I need some more practice, but hey, it just needs time and I'll get there. But it was so funny watching myself cutting up the onions, because it was just so slow. It felt so much slower than how I feel in real life when I'm cutting them up. But anyways, it was just funny. I obviously can't do the chef's way of cutting onions yet, but maybe one day I'll learn and get there. But one thing I do know, and I've known for many years, is that you're supposed to, whenever scraping something off, like the onions, you're supposed to use the opposite side of your knife, not the sharp one, in order to not blunt the knife. So that's what I'm doing here, and a little tip for you if you didn't know. Now for the meat, I really love the cookbook that you see me use for this recipe, because it talks a lot about the meat as well. So this meat that I'm using is pork shoulder. And what the Smart Cookbook says is that the pork shoulder is great for beginners as well, because it's a very well balanced kind of meat that has some fatty parts to it, but also a lot of the like really good quality meat. But because of the high content of collagen and the very short muscle parts, it's very easy to cut it up into cubes, which is what you see me do here. And then when it's like slow cooking or slow kind of boiling, it never dries out. So that's why it's also great to use it for the kind of recipe that I'm making out of it with the goulash and all that. And it's also a pretty cheap piece of meat, at least in here, so it's just very affordable to get. I'm storing the leftover bone marrow in these silicone cubes, and I'll put those in the freezer so that I can use it for whatever other recipe I might need to in the future. I'm getting ready all the spices that I will need for this, which is cumin, ground paprika, a sweet one, but it can also be the spicy kind. That's like the number one type of spice for this recipe. Some bay leaves, again, of course, salt, and also garlic is going to be added. So once I roast the onions and add a bit of the cumin, I can throw in the meat. Again, making sure that I don't blunt my knife. And then you just want to roast the meat so that it's nice and golden or brown at least. And then add in the garlic. Have that roasting for a little bit. I'm adding in the salt. And then later, a little bit of flour as well, just so that the sauce thickens up a little bit. I think at this point, it may have been like 15 minutes that it's been roasting. Then I add in the paprika. And at that point, I can pour in the broth that I've made the day before. I think I'm putting in like maybe a liter in total, like this whole jar, maybe a bit of another one. And then adding in the bay leaves, and at that point I can put the lid on and again have it on a very low simmer function for about 30 minutes. And then it's time to add in the sauerkraut. So this, as you can see, comes out of a packet. I didn't make my own sauerkraut. Maybe that's for next time. And I'm adding the whole package in. I think it's about 400 grams, I want to say. Stirring that up and then leaving that again with the closed lid on for another 30 or so minutes. And you can see here, my little helper is there with me. She's up from her nap. And I'm getting the side dish ready, which in this case is this kind of a dumpling, which again, as you can see, comes out of a package, not making that on my own. Maybe a next time. And this is a very typical side dish here in the Czech Republic for these kinds of dishes. Maybe I'll talk about it if I make one myself, but basically what you do with this one that has already been prepped is you just need to heat it up in some steam. So that's what I'm doing here. And since little Sarah is kind of okay in her learning tower there next to me, I'm also cutting up the veggies, which I have taken out of the broth, and I'll be using those for a soup later. So I'm just preparing those, but I won't be using them in this recipe. And then the last step for the goulash is to add in some cream just to smooth out the taste a little bit. And then stirring that, leaving that maybe 5 minutes to boil, and then this is done. So I can serve it up with the dumplings, and it makes for a very tasty meal. Now, it's also great when you leave it for a day. So it's this kind of a recipe that's even better, or supposed to be at least, even better the next day once the meat has really like soaked in the juices, and it's just a very typical Czech dish. I believe this was then the afternoon nap for Sarah, so I have decided to make some snacks for her in the form of those banana pancakes. Now for this, obviously I needed some bananas. I was also adding some oats into this, some coconut, which in the future I would like to try this with walnuts instead, but we'll have to see how that tastes. Then I've got some yogurt as well, some cinnamon for a little bit of spice, and some eggs. I believe that was it for that first part. blending all of that up. And then to make this into more of a pancake dough, I'm adding in some flour. Now, I don't really know how much flour I've added. What I do is just, I add a bit, I mix it up, see if it has that pancake dough consistency. And if not, I just add a little bit more and I keep going until I feel like it has that perfect consistency. And this is what feels right to me. I am using, I believe it's rapeseed oil. That's what it's called in English, which is a super common frying, I guess you could say, frying oil whenever you're using like this, how do you say, like higher heat. That's the oil you usually use, either that or sunflower oil. Those are the two most common ones here. So just making those nice and golden from both sides. I'm sure you all know how to make pancakes. And then I am doing the soup on the side as well. So I've got all of those veggies that I've cut up. And I also have some chicken broth from the week before. So I'll be making the soup with that one, not the beef broth that I had for the goulash, because that I think would just be a slightly different taste than I was going for. And what you see me add here is polenta, which if you're not familiar with it, it's like corn flour, just more coarse, oversimplified, but that's essentially what it is. And I'm adding that not so much for the taste, but rather to make the soup more thick so that it is easier to feed the baby with it. Because I've discovered that the thicker, more porridge-like it is, the easier it is to use. And that was all of my cooking in this video, the pancakes and a nice soup. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you were able to find some tips from it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.